white mothers on 5 North and the black mothers on 1 South, and the dramatic difference between these two, the only difference being skin color, but the way that they were treated was entirely different, and their births were entirely different. Black mothers, it precipitated in the elevator, and we'd flip the switch off and the baby would come out, and you'd hand the baby up to the mom, and she'd say, "Oh, look what I did. Oh," and she'd be all over the, "Oh, I'm so happy, and it's such a pretty baby." And when you're under general anesthesia and you give birth, none of that happens. You are not there. You're the one person who didn't come to your birth, didn't get to take any credit for it. It's not, "Look what I did." These anesthetized mothers, as they came back into consciousness, and eventually the doctor would show up and the nurse would show up with the new baby, and they would thank the doctor for delivering my baby. I just was speechless then. I'm speechless now. That was the mother who, even though the doctor pulled the baby out with forceps, it wasn't because she couldn't push a baby out, because we got to see what happens when you massively medicalize normal childbirth. I left nursing under circumstances in which I kept getting fired, basically for doing really what I would call the ethical thing, but not necessarily following the very specific protocols of a particular doctor.
My name is Faith Gibson. I am a California licensed midwife.
And my name is Robin Comfort. I am a doula.
And this is the Midwife Calling Podcast.
Join us for conversations about the politics of normal childbirth in the U.S., from mid-century practices to today, and of course, plenty of birth stories. We invite you to think and feel with us on this wild and precious ride of giving birth to our babies and to ourselves as parents. We're so grateful you're here. Last episode, we left off with Faith's journey from nursing in the South to meeting the midwives in California who would change the trajectory of her life and her life's work.
She had attended about 500 births at this time, and she was really, truly the best midwife that I have ever worked with.
One of those midwives was Donna Driscoll.
I was so pleased to work with Donna. I wanted to suck out as much information as I could.
I think in terms of the conversation about Donna is just as I thought she was an extraordinarily good midwife, and that combination of intuition and compassion with a scientific understanding of how the body works and what happens when it doesn't work, and why it is that a lot of times you actually do need interventions, and that's the right thing to do. And nobody should feel like that is somehow or another it's a failed home birth. In fact, I just did a California Maternal Quality Collaborative people.
Yeah.
Did you do that one as well? That the one on midwives and doulas?
Not the new one. No, not yet.
Yeah, you should go online and do it. It's really good. The presenters, the staff people, were extraordinarily, I guess one could call them bold.
Yeah.
Because to actually say that we should drop from the vocabulary, the obstetrical department vocabulary, the concept of failed home birth and lay midwife. That those are, it's kind of like the N word, it's what you call people when you're trying to insult them. And to actually acknowledge that that's what's going on here, that's prejudicial language and should not be used, is a really big step forward.
Can you explain that a little bit more about that term, lay midwife?
Well, the issue here in terms of the hospital's relationship, the obstetrician's relationship with the midwife who transfers in with the mother, is that we are talking about professionally licensed midwives.
Okay.
So to call them lay midwives would be like calling a doctor or student, a medical student, when he was an MD. He wouldn't appreciate it. It wouldn't be accurate. It's like when you call somebody a boy when he's a grown man. That kind of thing. That it's an insult. And the idea of the failed home birth is, well, in the first place, it's mean. But more to the point is that it obscures what's really happening, which is an appropriately timed transfer.
I like that.
The failure would be if you didn't bring the mother in and then something went wrong. That would be, a failed home birth, somebody who didn't pay any attention to the fact that the baby's heart tones were really getting kind of like, not so good anymore
Yeah.
or whatever. Or someone had pushed and 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 pushed some more. And you were just go, that's, just trust your body. Everything will work out. Well, sometimes things don't work out and you need to go to the hospital, and that's one of them.
Mhm.
And so a failed home birth is really the failure of the midwife to transfer the mother when she needed to go to the hospital. And then it's not what happened.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, I guess this is probably one of those issues that will be around for forever.
Mhm.
I remember seeing it's one of those shows where they videotape something happening in real time, and it had to do with emergency room care. They don't have those programs on TV anymore because a law changed and you now have to get signed permission from everybody in order to be able to show them, a medical setting. But the program was essentially an hour-long program, and we watched this emergency room doctor in, I believe it was Phoenix, Arizona, but it's one of those places that's out in the middle of nowhere. There's a huge amount of desert around them, and there are these really long roads that lead through the desert for miles and miles and miles. And it's just the perfect place to have terrible car crashes
No.
because nobody's paying attention. It's like everybody's speeding and they're out in the middle of nowhere and they can't imagine that another car would be stopped in front of them. Oh my God.
Right.
And so one after another, they're airlifting in this person and that person and this other person and all of this, having been an ER nurse myself, I really could appreciate what it would be like to try to deal with these repetitive disasters, one after another after another. And so then we see the doctor at the end of his shift and he's walking down the stairs. He's now got a coat on and his bag and he's headed for his car. And he's talking about how every time he calls one of the neurologists, basically brain surgeons, how they always give him a hard time. And the same for the cardiologist. He calls and says, this person really needs, and the oh, what the heck do you know? You're just a grunt, you're just an ER doctor. I'm the expert in cardiology, and don't tell me how to practice. And the same thing for the brain surgeons. And having worked in the ER, I remember we did have this one surgeon who was, I remember one of our patients touched him on the shoulder, said something like, "It's okay, doc," or something like that. And the guy went like this, like, "Don't touch me." It's like surgeons are, I don't know if they're still as weird as they were back in, at the time that I worked with them, but I suspect that they are. But in any case, what I realized was that here is this incredibly capable ER doctor who handled not just one really big problem, but again and again and again. It's what he does all day, every day. And here's this cardiologist and this neurologist who are doing the, what do kind of conversation. It's like, I can't imagine that obstetricians are ever going to find midwives to be their favorite people. That it's that same kind of thing that they think of, I'm up here and you're down here, So whether it's a cardiologist and a ER doctor, or it's an obstetrician and a midwife, we're always going to see this looking down on you conversation happen from time to time. So like, get over it. If you're waiting for ACOG to send us bouquets of flowers, not going to happen,
No.
So anyway, so look at your list and see what's next on the list there for us. I think what I would like to do is I have a new book. I'm always reading a new book, right?
Yeah.
I am reading another new book, which is I can't even remember the name of it, but it has an extraordinary part about mothering in it. Society has to know how important mothering is from the standpoint of that you can't have a civilization without having children, babies that are mothered in a way that allows them to grow up to be healthy adults.
Right.
And the fact that we don't compensate them for that we just expect them, it would be nice to live in a world where one had a stable partner that made so much money that you didn't have to work.
Yeah.
But in the last 20 or 30 years, we've come from it's probably been about 30 years now, the idea that mothers would work a little bit to supplement, that women would work a little bit outside the home to supplement the family income, to having two incomes. That when you have two incomes, actually what happens is people spend a lot more money. They have to continue to have two incomes because they can't afford they can't afford to not have two incomes. And what that means is that children are, being taken out of their beds at 5:30 in the morning and dragged off to daycare.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the people who work at daycare usually don't work there for very long. They work there for, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, something like that, and then they get a better job. And so it's always, there is no real, in terms of secure attachment, you really don't want your children to get attached to their daycare workers. You want them to be attached to family members. And so we have to figure out a way to acknowledge the value that mothers bring to the party. Like, you just don't have healthy adults without them.
Right.
I'm climbing down off of my high horse now. You can just tag it as the central importance. I mean, these are the issues. The centrality of mothers, and the fact that of all of the I mean, think about it, of all of the things that people do in the world, that they do it for free. There's really only two categories: slaves and women, in terms of their maternal duties and being, homemaker. That the two categories of people who do stuff for free, it's indentured servanthood.
Mm.
Um, and I don't resent it. I loved my children. But I know that one of the issues, like my son, when he was a little boy, about 4 or 5 years old, something like that, um, he would come to the back door. He would be playing in the backyard, and he would hit the back door, and he'd be yelling out, "Mom, are you home? Are you home, Mom? Mom, are you home?" In this frantic voice, because I was so often not home because I went to work.
Yeah.
And as a nurse, you work shifts, you work unusual. In other words, it's not like you go to work every day at 8 o'clock, come home 4:30 every afternoon.
Yeah.
So the fact that I not only worked, but I did it in a way that was kind of unpredictable,
Yeah.
really was really hard for him. And I, at that time, when he was a little boy, when he was 5 years old, I had just had another baby.
Mhm.
So, I was all involved in, taking care of a newborn and breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff. And we get so little support
Yeah.
for the process. We give so much and get so little from society. We spend so much time talking about democracy. That's a really big issue for me. I do not want to see us become an autocracy or a dictatorship or any of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, it seems as if it's like an addiction. We've become addicted to talking about politics and ruminating over it and worrying about it and spending money. How many texts during the last election here, the midterms, how many texts I got a day? Oh, just send money. Oh my God, it's horrible. We're just about to lose. You just got to send money. And then an hour later, there was another whole, how horrible it was. You just got to send money. That went on all day, every day.
Yeah.
Um, I want to see texts that say, there are mothers in Uganda that don't have enough, they don't have enough money to feed their kids. Send $3 and it's a pound of rice or whatever.
Yeah.
That we just are missing the boat on the most important critical element for civilization, which is A, women have to get pregnant.
Mhm.
B, the baby needs to be healthy, physically healthy, and needs to be mothered in that way that allows it what they call secure attachment, which is not a very sexy term, but it is that idea that the mother baby bond and the mother baby dyad is something really, I would say, holy. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a word starts with a W rather than an H. But in order for society to continue to do what it does so well, which is to keep the buses running and the phones on and the electricity running. You have to have healthy adults, and you don't get those unless you have mothering that really works. And that requires being supported. So I'm now climbing back down off of my high horse for the second time in one day.
I think that's a beautiful place to end today's
I
episode.
do too.
So, yes. All right. Thank you, Faith.
All righty.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you'll follow us for more conversations all about, well, maybe everything, and definitely highlighting midwifery care and the universal importance of mothers in our lives and society. See you next time.